Hello, my name is Emma, and today I am doing my July and August wrap-up. Now, the reason I decided to combine these videos is I felt like I would not have read enough in August to have a satisfying wrap-up, and so I thought I'd do them both together, but as it turns out, I did have two really great reading months that I didn't realize until now. So I'm really excited to share with you guys the books that I read in the months of July and August. So we are starting off with July, and the first set of books that I read in the month of July are actually from the biannual bibliothon. Normally I would do my biannual bibliothon wrap-up and then the wrap-up for that specific month, but I realized I had only read one book outside of the biannual bibliothon for the month of July, and so I just decided to combine those two wrap-ups together as well. So we have three wrap-ups in one. The first book I read for the biannual bibliothon was The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson. This was our group book that we all read together as a readathon, and we have a live show together at the end of the readathon's conclusion. So if you want to hear me as well as all my lovely hosts' opinions on The Unexpected Everything, I will leave the link to the live show discussion in the description of this video. I personally gave The Unexpected Everything 5 out of 5 stars. I had not read a contemporary for months at that point, and I was kind of dreading reading one because I was just such in a fantasy mood for the longest time, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I think it's one of the best contemporaries I've honestly ever read. I have read two other works by Morgan Matson, and I just feel like she's really grown in this one. This is a pretty hefty book. Contemporaries are not normally 500 pages, but as it takes course over 3 months, I just feel like we got a really decent amount of information and details from all of those 3 months, which we normally don't get. I really liked the story and thought it was very unique, and I just loved the character dynamic. There were just so many things I loved about this book, and I'm so happy I finally got to read it as part of the biannual bibliothon. The next book I read for the biannual bibliothon was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I used this book to complete a challenge for a reading book from an author that you've never read from before. I have read from Victoria Schwab in the past, but not V.E. Schwab. And it's published by two separate names, so I counted it. It's a little bit of cheating, but it worked, and I was really excited to jump into more of Victoria's adult works. I've just been putting this off for so long because I'm kind of reluctant always to pick up adult books, just because in my past experiences I relate and enjoy young adult books so much better than adults, and so when you throw in the fantasy element, that just totally changed the game, and I was really terrified of reading it, but I ended up absolutely loving it. I flew through this book. I can't believe it took me so long to pick it up. I just loved the characters, the world, the writing was just so beautiful, and I'm so excited to continue on with the series. I'm a little disappointed because I had taken this book like everywhere. I actually read it on like the beach one day. So the cover is like an off-white now, which is super disappointing, but I am super excited to get around to A Gathering of Shadows, and I'm just so happy I picked up this book finally. The next book I read for the biannual bibliothon was actually an audiobook, and that is The Fiery Heart by Rochelle Mead, which is the 4th book in the Bloodline series. If you remember from my June wrap-up, I discussed that I wanted to get into the Bloodline series as I loved the first one, and I decided to pick them up in audiobooks. So I continued through this month, and Bloodlines completed the challenge for read a book with your favorite mythical creature, which is vampires, of course. I have to say, I was blown away by The Fiery Heart. It is definitely my favorite in the series. After concluding it, I just loved it so much. Things just got so intense in the book. I feel like I got to view the characters from a totally different light, and it just expressed a lot of really important themes that were really important to me as a reader. I'm trying really hard to think of more like intellectual things I can talk about when it comes to The Fiery Heart, but I loved it so much. It was such a great book. I had the best time reading it, and I did not want to stop listening to it at all. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm so happy I picked up Bloodlines because that book just blew me away. I also listened to another audiobook, which of course is Silver Shadows by Rochelle Mead, which is book 5 of Bloodlines. Now, unfortunately, I did not like Silver Shadows as much as the previous books. I originally thought that it might be my least favorite. I don't know if it's my least favorite or my second least favorite. Basically, what had happened is I had recently listened to another group of audiobooks, and one of the books in that series was so similar to the beginning of Silver Shadows that I just felt like I had read the story before, and it was a little brutal to get through just because like it just seemed so generic in the beginning to me, but rethinking everything, I realized I really did enjoy the ending of it, and the ending really sold me and had me higher my rating after doing some more reflection on it. So I think the beginning of the book was really rough, but I ended up loving the ending. I originally gave it 3 stars, but again, after all that reflection, I gave it 4, and so I feel like I would benefit from a reread of Bloodlines despite just reading them again. I feel like if I had reread them, maybe my feelings on Silver Shadows would change, because I know that is a lot of people's favorite books in the Bloodline series, but it just was not my favorite, although I did still still really enjoy listening to it. And again, the ending was so great and so intense and was the perfect setup for the final book. And so I am really happy that I've been continuing with Bloodlines. And the final book I read for the biannual bibliothon is Night Film by Marisha Pessel, and this completed the challenge for read a book in a different format than you normally read, and I chose this one because it is mixed media. So all throughout the book there are different little like pictures and web pages and stuff, and it just really added to the elements of the story. I absolutely loved Night Film. It is one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I went out and bought my dad a copy of it so he could read it, and now he's reading it and loving it. Sarah from Sarah Without an H loves this book, and she has a fantastic video on why you should read Night Film, so I'm going to link that below. She was the one who bought me this book and got me into reading it, and I'm just so thankful for that. If you don't know, Night Film follows this journalist who has this kind of rough past with an underground kind of eclectic filmmaker. So the filmmaker's daughter dies and everyone kind of believes it to be a suicide, but this investigator is not convinced and he wants to prove that it's something else because he just is so obsessed with the Cordova name, and the whole story is just about his interactions with all these people that match with this girl, Ashley Cordova, in the days leading up to her death and trying to piece together all of it, and it is just the most intense book. It was crazy. There was so much going on, and it was just such a thriller. Like, this is the definition of a thriller book. I loved it so much. This is totally a book that I would reread and recommend to anyone, and it really got me into the adult genre, which is what I'm super thankful for. Like I said, I don't normally reach for adult, but Night Film made me realize that the adult psychological mystery thriller kind of genre is kind of what I need. Like, I need more books like it in my life, and I'm so much more motivated to go pick up books of that sort now that I've read Night Film. So I loved this book. I'm so happy I picked it up. Definitely one of my favorites of the year, and you should totally pick it up. So after the biannual bibliothon finished, I realized I did read 2 books afterwards, not one. I listened to another audiobook, which was The Ruby Circle by Rochelle Mead, the final book in the Bloodline series. I gave The Ruby Circle 4 stars as well. I just wasn't as interested in the plot as I was with books like Bloodlines and The Fiery Heart. I just felt the plot of The Ruby Circle was not as strong as a lot of the other ones, and it definitely had some weak points in my opinion, and as a plot-based reader, that's what I really focus on the most. I do love characters and I love appreciating writing, but I'm a big plot person, and so when the plot of a series kind of falters a little bit, it does have a significant impact on my enjoyment of the book, but I did enjoy it. I loved the Bloodline series as a whole. I am hoping to review it, so if I can get my thoughts together on that, I will have a review of the Bloodline series as a whole up to my channel. But I'm so grateful that I finally got around to finishing the Bloodline series because I loved it, and it's definitely one of my favorites now. And the final book that I read in the month of July is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is a book I have been putting off for the longest time. I met Sabaa Tahir like 2 years ago, and I just recently picked up her book. This book was fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved everything about this book. Surprisingly, the beginning of this book was so hard for me to get into. I was about 75 pages in, and I was just not feeling it at all. The writing was weird to me. The language was weird to me. I was just not clicking with it, but something happened. I can't even tell you exactly what point it was, but there was just something about this book that just had me so intoxicated by the story that I could not stop reading. I am so excited to read A Torch Against the Night. I just think this series has so much value to it, and I totally understand all the hype that went around when it first came out. So for those of you who have been telling me for years now to read An Ember of the Ashes, I finally have. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm super happy I picked it up. Now we move on to my August reads. So in August, I actually read 5 books. I would have 6 on this list, but I still have an hour left in the audiobook I'm currently listening to, so I'm gonna wait until my September wrap-up to tell you my complete feelings on that. But let's jump right into the August books. The first book I read in the month of August, obviously because it came out on the last day of July, is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. I was excited for the Cursed Child, but I was also very nervous because obviously when we get external canon information that is separate from this series, there's just always this kind of nervousness. Is it gonna compare to the books? Is it gonna be as good? Is it gonna be better? Is it gonna be worse? A lot of internal conflict. I ended up giving Harry Potter and the Cursed Child 3.5 stars. I have a Goodreads review of this that is pretty much spoiler free. You can hide or unhide the spoilers in it, but if you haven't read it, that's a really great way to know my thoughts because it is super long. I also have the longest review in the history of BookTube on my channel. I think it's almost like 40 minutes long of me just going in on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and all the things I loved, all the things I hated. There was a lot to talk about and it's super long, so if you want to watch that, that video will be linked below as well. I feel like I can't say much more because I feel like those two reviews just like capture everything I was feeling and thinking. I also did live tweet every single thought I had while reading this book. So if you want to go on Twitter under the hashtag, it was emmareadstcc. You can see everything the moment I read it and what my reaction was in 140 characters. I am happy that we got this book. I'm happy that I read it. There were things I did really, really love about it, but there were so many problems in just the foundation of this book that it was really hard for me to give it a higher rating than 3.5 stars. But again, I would totally go see this play if it was live. I'm hoping to in the future. And I am still glad that we got more Harry Potter content. Although there were things I did not like about this book, I'm still happy that we got to see Harry and the Golden Trio and everyone involved as adults, as well as their children growing up and going through Hogwarts. I just don't necessarily agree with a lot of the choices that this book made. But that's life. Again, I'm still happy that I read it, and I would love to know your thoughts on Harry Potter and the Cursed Child because I know that there are so many different thoughts on this book. The next book I read in the month of August was an audiobook. I listened to Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by, I don't even know the author's name. I unfortunately really did not like this book at all. Again, this is something that I put a lot of time and effort into writing a Goodreads review for, so if you want to hear like all of my full thoughts, you can read that. It is in the description of this video. Ultimately, I gave this book 1 star. It is probably one of the least favorite books that I have ever read. I'm going to start with the 2 things that I did love. I absolutely loved Dante. He was my favorite character. He was the reason I finished the book. He is the definition of precious, and while I did not like the story at all, if we had any extra content from Dante, whether it be a novella or a separate book, I would read it in a heartbeat because I just think he is one of the loveliest characters I have ever read about. And I really enjoyed reading from a Mexican family's perspective. I feel like not only do we not get a lot of Spanish characters in literature, but we also don't get a big family dynamic. And so seeing Mexican culture represented and watching Dante struggle with it, and seeing Ari's family, there was just so much to it that I appreciated and I learned from it. So I absolutely loved the family dynamic and the Mexican culture that was implemented into this book. To the things that I didn't like, I'm super upset that this wasn't a dual perspective book, and anyone who knows me knows that I almost always prefer single perspective. So this is a really, really big thing for me to say that. There were so many moments in this book that I thought should have been from Dante's perspective, and I just cannot comprehend why Ari was telling us all of these things. I'm not trying to invalidate Ari's feelings or his importance to the story, but I think it absolutely should have at least been a dual perspective, half and half between Aristotle and Dante. I also did not like the writing, which I know is something that so many people loved about it. This book just was not for me. It did not click for me. I'm so glad that it meant so much to so many people and people were able to identify with it, and this is some of people's favorite book of all time. Like, it's won awards. I think that's fantastic, but it was not the book for me at all. I did not like it, and I'm disappointed because I really wanted to, because it's a book I've been planning on picking up for 2 years now, maybe 3, but you live and you learn. It just wasn't for me, but again, I'm really happy a lot of people enjoyed it. On a lighter note, the next book that I read in the month of August was Furthermore by Tahara Mafi. I received an advanced reader copy at BEA, and I wanted to read it before the release because I went to Tahara's signing and launch party for Furthermore in New York City. I have vlogged that whole event, so if you want to see that video, I'll link it in the description. I give Furthermore 4 out of 5 stars. I loved this story. Tahara's writing is so beautiful, and that totally stands true for Furthermore. The whimsicality had goods and bads. There were moments where I really appreciated it and other moments where it was like, this is just weird and a little too much and it's not making much sense. Another book I have a very long, extensive Goodreads review for, where you can either read spoilers or hide them, so I will link that below as well. There are some really important moments that I felt were in this book and other things that I think absolutely should have been changed. But it was a very fun story. I loved the characters. I loved getting to know this world, and I'm really happy I read it. It truly is just such a wonderful story, and I don't normally enjoy middle grade, but this was a middle grade book that I really, really loved. And so I'm just happy Tahara is doing new things and experimenting, and I definitely think this was a good book and I would really recommend it to you guys. Next book I read in the month of August is Immortal Song by Megan Crew. This is actually sent to me by the author. I will have a review of this book coming out to my channel soon, and it will be spoiler free. Again, I have a Goodreads review for this one too, so if you don't want to wait until the video review, you can check out my thoughts. This is another book I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Some things I loved about this book is I loved having an all Japanese cast. That's not something I read about at all, especially in the fantasy genre, and so I had so much fun reading this book. I loved learning about Japanese culture more, and we learned a little bit about Shinto deities, and it was just such a cool read, and I'm just so glad that I read it. If you don't know, Immortal Song follows this girl, Sora, who is the princess of Mount Fuji's spirit kingdom until one day the kingdom is attacked, and she finds out that her powers for all of her life have been borrowed from the mountain, and actually she's a mortal girl who is taking the place of the actual princess who is currently living in Tokyo as a human. The whole book is kind of a play on the stereotypical urban fantasy trope where the girl finds out that she's a part of a mythical race and has to save the world. This is about a girl who has led her life thinking that she's part of this mythical race, but actually is human and has to save the world. And it was just a super interesting twist on that. The cast of characters were so kick-ass and I loved it so much. The only thing I did not like about this book really was the romance, which again, big shocker coming from me, where I love all of these romance books. I thought this book was just so strong without it that it didn't need a romance, and the romance kind of didn't take over the story, but I didn't enjoy reading it as much because I was so focused on all of the action-y, crazy bits. So really me saying that is a compliment because it means that this book is not reliant on its romance and it really could stand without it. I just think I would have probably given it 5 stars had the romance not been there, but if you want to hear more of my thoughts, you can definitely check out that review when it comes, but I am still so glad I read Immortal Song, and I would really recommend you guys all pick it up too. And the final book that I read in the month of August is one that I am super excited to talk about, which is The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I have not read this book before, and everyone has been telling me for years to read it, and I'm so happy I finally picked it up. This is a life-changing book. There's no other way to describe it. I flew through it not just because it's short and the format of the storytelling is a little bit more unconventional because it's told in letters. I flew through it because I was so intoxicated by the story and I just could not stop and get enough. I thought the characters were great. I loved all of their different dynamics, and I love the narrative. I thought it was just super unique and it approached things in a super cool and individual way, which is something I really appreciate about books. Honestly, Perks of Being a Wallflower has definitely become one of my favorite books that I've ever read, not just for the year, and I'm so happy I finally gave it a chance. I know there's so many people watching that are like, yes, Emma, I'm so glad you finally read it, but I'm really glad too. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's definitely a book I'm going to be reading in the future, and I need to watch the movie. That's like the bottom line. I have not watched it yet. Maybe I'll watch it tonight, but I am just so in love with this story, and I'm so happy it exists. Alrighty, well, that is it for my July and August wrap-up. My August book haul will be coming soon, but I think I had a really productive 2 past months of reading. While there were some books I didn't love as much, there were a lot of books that I absolutely adored, and I feel like that's the kind of balance I want as a reader. I want books where I can really critique them and kind of pull them apart and analyze them, but I also want books that I can just love and enjoy and just have a good time reading. As always, let me know your favorite book that you read in the month of either July or August, or both, because I would love to know and maybe pick some of those books up in September. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!